Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Standard Open in Indianapolis, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller, alongside Jeff Hoogland, leading the way in the Player of the Year race. You took a weekend off.
I did.
A couple weekends ago, and Tom Ross caught up.
He's got 5 points, okay.
But you were back here.
I am. It's going to be a lot harder for him to game when I'm actually playing Magic alongside him.
In the sideboard with a Jeskai flash deck.
Yep.
Looks a lot like kind of what people are doing in Modern with the variant, but you're kind of taking it here, using a lot of new cards too.
Yep. Yeah, so this deck is very similar to the deck that I played week 1 of previous Standard in Columbus. It's got like kind of a blue-white spirits theme, and that deck I was actually very close to playing a third color to play creature lands. There's just such a huge advantage in decks like this. Your games go long, you're bound to flood out, and you want your lands to do things when you're flooding out in those longer games.
Okay, before we get into the individual pieces, you did a lot of streaming the last couple of weeks with new Standard decks.
Yep.
Trying just basically everything. What kind of put you on this deck, and why are you still on it?
If there's a crappy flash deck to play in a format, I will play it.
Okay.
It's just the archetype that I enjoy playing Magic the most, and I play Magic to have fun, so I know I'll enjoy this archetype. In the gauntlet that we had put together with like the energy aggro and the red-white aggro and the Temerge decks and the Bant decks, this was keeping pace with everything else, and I felt like if it was on par with everything else, I knew I would have fun playing it. Might as well sleeve it up.
All right, so let's get into it. You've got the spirits that we expect. We got Rattle Chain, Selfless Spirit, Spell Queller, and then Archangel Avacyn, which is, as you said, last season, the best spirit, and still probably so. Correct,
yeah, it's just a very powerful card. Being able to play 4 Avacyn better than any other deck in the format is huge. When you pass with 5 mana up on turn 5, is it Avacyn? Are you just casting a Glimmer? Do you have Spell Queller plus a rebuff to force it through? They don't know what you're doing whenever you pass with mana, because you're always passing with mana.
Right, I feel like a lot of cards got brought up after this rotation, but Avacyn was not one of them for some reason. That card sort of flew under the radar. Yep. Even though it was extremely powerful and just kind of everywhere before.
Yeah, Magic
looks
cards,
very good, even like better now, I guess I would say.
Magic cards that were great before, still great. It's just the power level, it's just a very pushed card. The stats are amazing, even without flipping, and then you factor in that it flips and it acts as a pseudo wrath on a flash creature is just very powerful.
Right, and of course we're calling this Jeskai Flash because every spell in this deck except Fumigate is basically instant speed.
Yep, Selfless Spirit is like half instant speed.
Sure.
Right? You have to have Rattle Chains out, but yeah, essentially you're always passing with mana.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these new cards. We got a lot of them coming in. We've got Harness Lightning. This is kind of the reason you have red, except for the creature lands.
Yep.
But then you're playing Revolutionary Rebuff, and this was a card that a lot of people looked at and said, there's going to be a lot of Gear Hulks, there's going to be a lot of artifacts. Is it still pulling its weight when this stuff's running around?
Yeah, so I don't think there's a single deck in the format that's all artifacts right now. All of the decks we tried similar to that in our testing just weren't particularly powerful. So I felt like if someone did have a build of that, we'd be able to afford having those possibly dead cards in game 1. And you can always board them out post-board. And the matches where they just have like regular spells that they're casting that are artifact, it's such a tempo swing to like counter Avacyns and counter 4-mana Planeswalkers, even their 3-drops with Revolutionary Rebuff.
Right. Now we've got the new, draw spell here. A lot of people said, I remember back in the day when you could draw cards for 3 mana or 2 mana. Now we have, draw 2, but scry and some energy, which, you get a little bit of synergy with your harness.
Correct, yeah. I mean, Read the Bones is just a widely accepted, very powerful card, and this has an increased mana cost, but it is an instant speed card, which gives it more flexibility. And the fact that it's allowing our Harness Lightnings to kill things with 5 toughness, it's allowing our Aether Hubs to produce additional colored mana, it just really pushes it over the top.
Mm-hmm. Stasis Snare is your kind of catch-all removal spell, and you've got the Miser's Fumigate running around in here as well, right?
Correct, yeah, it's just like one of those kind of catch-up cards in the main deck where occasionally things get out of control and you're just like, I need this reset button.
Right, and we saw that back in the day with Tragic Arrogance or Planner Outburst, whichever Wrath you chose to play, you could kind of sideboard into that kind of deck.
Correct, yeah, and it might be possible that White Gear Hulk is good in that slot as well, but I like the interaction between Fumigate with Selfless Spirit where it's often a one-sided Wrath.
Mm-hmm. All right, we got to mention the Rainmaker here, Torrential Gear Hulk, the blue one.
Yep.
We got 1 copy, but this is kind of just another flash threat that gets a little bit of value.
Yeah, so all of our other threats fly, so in order for something to be able to break that mold, it has to be very uniquely powerful. And Gear Hulk, in most games in this deck, it's basically either a Flame Tongue Kavu, because it comes down and it Harness Lightnings to kill one of their creatures and then blocks something else, or it flashes back Glimmer of Genius and you draw 2 cards off your 5/6. It's just, it's very uniquely powerful.
I think that's acceptable.
Yeah, and another thing to mention is we only have 12 instants in the main deck so playing multiple of these means there's going to be times where you just don't have a target for it on turn
Yeah.
6. And 6-mana cards just get clunky. Like,
Sure.
we only have so much room for things like Avacyn and Fumigate and Gearhulk that cost 5 or more mana.
Right. I mean, those are only really expensive cards in the entire deck. You know, sideboard have a couple 5-mana spells, but
Yep.
I think you can afford that with this deck because you're kind of playing this like tempo-y game that can go long.
Correct.
So having something as powerful as this seems fine.
Yep.
All right, we have all the creature lands, fumerals and spires.
Yep, we have 5 of those. One of the nice things about playing creature lands is last season I had to play Anticipate in this deck because you either flooded too much with 26 lands or you didn't hit enough lands with 24 and 25 lands. So now we can play 26 lands in this deck and not feel bad about it because our lands are attacking when we flood out.
Right, so you have attacking from all angles, you're playing instant speed, looks very good. You're 6-0 so far, correct?
Yep.
And now let's take a look at the sideboard where you have a couple all-stars here we're hiding. Let's go ahead and highlight the new cards. We have Ceremonious Rejection,
Yep.
which I think that is your only, and Fumigate.
And Fumigate, yep.
Right. So obviously this card just reads as a thing that's just going to be very powerful, countering anything colorless. We have Eldrazi, we have a bunch of artifacts.
Yep, and if you notice, it's the only card in my sideboard that there's more than 2 of. If there is a deck out there that's really powerful where Revolutionary Rebuff isn't good, Ceremonious Rejection is going to be excellent most
Sure.
likely. So you can just really clean like 4 of these out, 3 of those in, and just nice and clean.
Yeah, 1-mana answer to Gearhulk seems...
Oh, it doesn't
Oh,
answer
those are
Gearhulks,
colored.
those
Sorry,
are colored.
sorry.
But it does counter things like Elder Deep Fiend, and I countered a Drowner of Hope with it, Emerald
Right, the
Pool, things like
Eldrazi.
that. The Eldrazi,
Yeah, that's what I should have went with. And we've got a bunch of counter spells. On top of that, you have negates. You also have summary dismissals. Emrakul still exists.
Yep,
You know.
and Rebuff's the kind of card, and this was very popular when Mana Leak was in Standard, you often board them out because people are often tempoing themselves by playing around it. So we want some other hard counters to bring in, so once they're done playing around it, you still get them anyways.
All right, let's talk about Jace Unraveler of Secrets. This card got very little play in the
It might as well be
previous
a new
Standard, but I'm seeing a lot more of this card today in a lot of decks, not just yours as well. So
It's very uniquely powerful. I was between this or Gideon for this type of slot, and the deciding factor between playing Jace and playing Gideon was that against the black-white control decks, like were popular last season, if they play a Sorin, they have to trade their Sorin for your Jace that just drew a card on an empty board, which is really relevant. If they just get to play a Sorin and kill your Gideon, and they just their Sorin sticks around, you're probably
Sure.
losing that game.
all right, yeah, it seems to trade favorably in that situation. And of course, your deck can protect it very well too.
Correct. Yeah, we had. I had a control mirror 2 rounds ago, and I got to ult the Jace. We managed to win that game.
Whew, that seems pretty good.
It was not the worst.
Then you got a bunch of removal spells here. Galvanic Bombardment. This card's stock has gone up. A lot of decks are running this now.
Yep.
And then Blessed Alliance, which I think is just one of the strongest cards, not seeing a ton of play right now.
It is super flexible. You use all of the modes fairly relevantly. We can untap Torrential Gearhulks and Spellquellers and even Selfless Spirits and Rattlechains to trade in combat. Getting life is always excellent, and obviously just being 1/4 removal is fine.
Okay. Are there any cards you kind of tried out that didn't make the cut here, or you want to find room for?
I started to build similar to the one I had last season with Mausoleum Wanderer, and I quickly realized that that card just didn't feel particularly good. If you play too many things that die to Archangel's Avacyn, Flip Trigger, things kind of get awkward for you. Having more small troops like that also turn on their smaller removal also isn't ideal.
Okay. Now you've been doing a lot of testing, and I've been asking people in Deck Techs this weekend, what decks have they tried or they looked at but couldn't quite, seal the deal, that couldn't quite make the deck as good as they wanted. What are those decks in this format for you? Like, are there any ideas that are floating around that you want to still work on and, find the right mix?
The one deck that stood out to us as being uniquely powerful that no one in our group pulled the trigger on this weekend was a white colorless Eldrazi deck. I think Displacer is still a very uniquely powerful card, and it's harder to play in the format now because we don't have all these pain lands for free. So really, colorless is a full color now. It's not a free splash. So, Thought-Knot Seers and Thalias and Copter is insane.
Right.
So that really is what stood out to me.
Right. Talk about Smuggler's Copter, because you were high on this card very early on in your testing. You mentioned it on social media. It was very good.
Yep.
You didn't play a Smuggler's Copter deck, so what was the decision there?
So Copter's excellent, and I think any deck that probably has like 20 or more creatures, you probably want 4 Copters in it somewhere in this round. It's basically the hangerback walker of this set. It's colorless. Everyone can play it. It's powerful. This deck doesn't quite have enough threats to play in it, and I think if I was still on Mausoleum Wanderer, it would be reasonable to play, but our guys are attacking for 2 power in the air anyway, so I don't really want to play another card to enable that. Plus, This deck doesn't mind hitting land drop 7 and 8 and 9 because you want to attack with a creature land and hold mana up.
Okay. Is Copter still, doing its job in this format? Do you still think it's as good as advertised?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Copter puts a restriction on how other people have to build decks, and it's one of the reasons Harness Lightning is in this deck with the splash, because I think you need a minimum of seven ways to kill Copter in your main deck, or you're just going to die to it.
All right. Well, it seems like you've been doing just the trick today. You're 6-0, 2-0, off buys, but then you've had some pretty decent matches, and you're killing it. The deck looks good. It looks a lot like what you played last season, so. Right. I see you chasing that Player of the Year run, so Tom, you better be on the lookout.
Getting
Jeff,
close.
Thanks for joining me here in the sideboard. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all week long for the action here in Indy.